In today's video, I am having a lovely time taking my macro lens for a walk in the forest. I've come to the Queen Elizabeth Forest Park in Scotland. It's a new area for me and there are endless pathways through the shrubs and amazing trails through the trees. It's an area that's so full of life and, therefore, hopefully full of opportunity for macro shots. I brought the one macro lens, my trusty Canon 100mm, and I've got no set route. It's just about wandering through and seeing what catches my eye. As you can probably tell, it's a very grey and overcast day. Well, normally that would be terrible for landscapes. You don't get that dramatic light falling on things and everything just looks a little bit low contrast. But that is exactly why it's great for being in the forests, particularly for getting down low and shooting macro, because you don't have that high contrast, you don't have those little hot spots of light going through the leaves and casting big pools of bright light on the ground. Instead, everything's got a really nice even exposure. Downside is that it is pretty dark, and so certainly if you're shooting at f8 you're going to need a tripod, because most of my shutter speeds are about a third of a second, half a second, and doing that handheld is impossible. Pretty much impossible. There's this great mushroom here that would otherwise be awesome poking out of this, but as you can see, it's been rather eaten at, I think, by slugs, maybe some birds or something. So it's not the most attractive thing anymore, which is a bit of a shame, but that's fine. I'm sure I can find plenty of other material to use around here. One of the biggest difficulties when you're coming to an area that's so big like this, where there is so much ground to cover, is just finding what to take photos of. Because obviously you can travel miles and miles and miles and miles by car, by foot, around forests and places like this. But macro is all about finding tiny things, minuscule little things on the ground, and with every footstep you take, you can pass 100 potential photo opportunities. And that's one of the reasons why I find macro photography so exciting, is that it's always something new to find, and you can come back to the same area again and again and again, and you can find different photos. But it does mean that it takes quite a lot of practice and a lot of time to move around and try and see photos, trying to find those opportunities. If you see a trail, take it, so you never know what you might find. Aha, do you see it? No, not this paper that's been left. This little mushroom. I've had to get my tripod in quite a weird position because I want to get really, really low and basically be sort of looking up at it. So this is kind of what I'm looking at the moment. We see that the stem is just sort of coming out of the ground. A lot of foreground that's going to be really out of focus, hopefully. I don't love it. I think it's because the actual mushroom itself doesn't really stand out. So what I'm going to do is try it at f2.8. Definitely, I think using a wider aperture is better here. It's definitely not going to be the greatest of shots, but that bright red of its cap really did stand out nicely against the background. That's certainly what caught my eye. And usually I feel that if a shot catches my eye in the first place, then it'll probably make for a fairly decent photo. There are no bears in Scotland, but for some reason walking through here, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get attacked by a bear. It just feels like a bear area. A bearia. Everything is so green, so full of life. There are bees, there are insects, loads of little tiny things. Look, these little leaves, whatever they are, these tiny spiky bits of moss. There is so much to see, and it's all really coming to life. So I am loving exploring every little trail I can find around here. When I'm talking about things catching my eye, I even mean things like these little clover leads, which are just lighter in the background and they just sort of stand out. Just things like that, little splashes of colour, little splashes of light. It can be anything, it can be a leaf, it can be a bit of wood, it can be a mushroom, but they are there. And once you start to get your eye in, as it were, you start to see it more and more. By the end of the day, you're seeing it everywhere, and you keep stopping every 30 seconds to try and take a photo. Absolutely infuriating, whoever you're walking with. Now, of course, there is a debate on whether or not you need to use a tripod or not, but it really does just come down to the conditions you're in at the time. This is a pretty cloudy day, and in the forest it's actually surprisingly dark. And so most of my exposures have been about half a second or longer. So of course I have to use a tripod for that. So it makes sense to carry one. Of course, if you do find yourself in a situation where there's basically no light, you can bring your own. And that's exactly what I'm doing here, because I found these really nice mushrooms here, but as you might be able to tell, we've got very little ambient light around in this scene. So everything looks really, really flat and doesn't really have much, much pop to it. So what I've done is I've got one of my own lights, this little speed light, off camera here with a softbox on it. This is going off to the side of the mushrooms. I've got a trigger on my camera. I've manually focused. This is my scene. Lots of nice foreground out of focus. That light pops and we get lovely side light coming in. I use the same technique here with this shot of this tall, slender mushroom. I loved how it stood by itself against the green moss, but it was by using my flash off camera that I was able to really let it stand out in a much more dramatic way. And the same here too, but this time positioning the head of the mushroom over this patch of light in the background to form a mystical kind of halo. I really like this mushroom here, and I particularly like it with this really low down angle, with putting it in the right thirds. As you can see, I've got my light off to the left, it's just out of camera. Let's do a quick test. You can see that it's got a lovely light on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus stack so I can make sure that I can use a wide aperture to get all of this nice depth of field, but I can make sure that the stem is really sharp and all of the blades and the rim of the fungus itself is pin sharp. So it's probably about 5 or 6 different shots. Well, the light's really fading and I am getting very hungry, so I'm going to call it a day here, but hopefully you have found this video helpful. If you've enjoyed it, please do hit that like button, consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.